Just want you to be on the lookout for this 15-year-old. Her name is Sarah Romero. Could be in danger, they're worried.
And despite those inquiries, we still haven't been able to establish the reasons why Leanne's gone missing.
1,000 people every day go missing in the United States.
In a heartbeat, a person can just be there and then gone.
On a hot summer evening back in June of 1983, 15-year-old Emmanuela Orlandi disappeared after attending a music lesson in Vatican City in central Rome, and she hasn't been seen since. The Vatican, being such a place of heightened security, might seem an odd spot for someone to disappear, but Orlandi was the daughter of a prominent Vatican employee and was often around the area in the gardens, and even frequently ran into the Pope, John Paul II, on her many outings. Her brother recalled the city being more like a small town, inhabited by a close-knit group of about 6 families who knew each other well. But Emmanuela's strange disappearance would pull focus away from the Holy See and launch decades of conspiracy theories, including, but not limited to, the Mafia, Satanists, sex trafficking, and sacrifice. But what events sparked this barrage of rumors? Emmanuela had attended a regular music lesson on June 22, 1983, and had called her sister after the class to tell her that a representative from Avon Cosmetics had offered her a job. It was the last time anyone would hear from the young girl. When she failed to return home the following day, her parents called both her music teacher and the police, and she was reported as a missing person. A witness would initially claim that they saw a girl matching Orlandi's physical description getting into a green BMW near the music school on the night of her disappearance, but this was a lead that would sadly go nowhere. Shortly after this, the Orlandi family received an ominous phone call promising to return the kidnapped girl in exchange for the release of Mehmet Ali Aka, a Turkish national who had been imprisoned for an assassination attempt on the Pope 2 years earlier. No further calls followed this initial ransom request, and this lead too would quickly dry up. It had been then suggested, according to the girlfriend of the leader of an Italian crime syndicate, Banda della Magliana, that Orlandi was kidnapped in order to force the Vatican to pay them back for outstanding loans. This girlfriend of Enrico de Pedis would claim that he told her that Orlandi had been kidnapped and was then killed when the debts were not paid. Other than the testimony of this single witness, no other proof of an extortion attempt by the Mafia against the Vatican was ever solidified in the case. But perhaps the most alarming theories claimed that the local police, the Vatican itself, and high-profile lawmakers kidnapped Orlandi for the purposes of sex trafficking. Or at least, that is what the Vatican's chief exorcist, Father Gabriele Amorth, believes. Amorth was appointed by Pope John Paul II, who had close ties to the Orlandi family. Quote, "This was a crime with a sexual motive," Amorth insisted. Parties were organized with a Vatican gendarme acting as the recruiter of the girls. The network involved diplomatic personnel from a foreign embassy to the Holy See. I believe Emmanuela ended up as a victim of this circle. Unquote. Even as recently as 2019, a promising tip emerged claiming that Orlandi had been buried in a Vatican tomb, but as of yet, no remains have been uncovered, and no trace of Emmanuela Orlandi has been seen since that warm summer evening back in 1983, despite the continued persistence of her family to organize demonstrations in hopes to spark a renewed investigation into her disappearance. Shortly after 7 p.m. on February 9, 2004, the Grafton County Sheriff's Department in New Hampshire received reports of a single-car accident on a remote country road. The first call notified them that a black Saturn sedan had been wedged against a snowbank in Woodsville. The second call came from a bus driver named Butch Atwood, who had seen the same car and reported that a young woman was inside of it and appeared unharmed, but that she was noticeably cold to the touch. Atwood also mentioned that the woman had begged him not to call the police, which he at first obliged, then seemed to think better of the strange incident and reported it when he arrived home. Police arrived on the scene to find the woman Atwood had reported seeing nowhere to be found, but they quickly believed it to be 21-year-old University of Massachusetts student Maura Murray. And in fact, it was determined to be her vehicle abandoned at the side of the road. At first, it seemed fairly cut and dry. Perhaps tired or drunk, Murray had swerved off the road and gotten herself stuck in a snowbank. But a search of the area revealed no trace of the missing college student, and this would launch a missing persons case that is still hotly debated and unsolved to this day. The authorities initially thought that Murray, perhaps intoxicated or injured from the accident, and afraid she might get in trouble with the authorities, had wandered off from the crash site after being seen by Atwood to an unfortunate fate in the dark and snowy woods, but no body was located in the search area. And in fact, the last person to have seen Murray before she walked away from her car and into thin air was her father, Fred. He had seen her the night before the car was found when the pair had dinner together. He recalled the meal as being perfectly normal and that Maura was not acting strangely. He lent Murray his car so she could drive back to campus to attend a party later that night. After 2:30 a.m., Fred Murray received a phone call from Maura. She explained she had crashed the car on her way home from the party, and her father assured her that while she would need to report the crash the next day to the DMV, there was no need for concern. He recalled that when she got home that night, she seemed perfectly fine, but the next day, his daughter would suddenly disappear. The circumstances surrounding the disappearance seemed to become more and more strange and sinister the more police dug into it. On the morning of her disappearance, the 9th, Murray contacted the professors from her classes to let them know she'd be taking a week off of school due to a death in the family. A death which never occurred. She then packed up her dorm room, drove to an ATM in her own car, and withdrew $280. She then went to the DMV, presumably to report the previous evening's accident, then bought a large amount of alcohol from a local store. She then called her own voicemail around 4:30 p.m. Inside the car, police would find printed directions to a condo complex in Burlington, Vermont, and phone records would later show that she had called one of the owners. These were the last pieces of evidence regarding Murray's activities prior to Atwood seeing her at the accident site of her black Saturn, save for one. A note to her boyfriend detailing the problems in their relationship was later found in her cleaned-out dorm room, and despite purported sightings of her in following years and an active investigation led by her father, Maura Murray has remained a missing person ever since. On October 21, 1978, Frederick Valentine was conducting a routine training flight in a light Cessna 182L over the Bass Strait between the Australian mainland and Tasmania. The 20-year-old was an experienced pilot with about 150 hours of flight time when he suddenly vanished. The incident was strange from the beginning. After departing Moorabbin for King Island, Valentine radioed to the Melbourne Flight Service with a baffling report. There was an unidentified aircraft tailing his plane at about 4,500 feet. He described it as traveling at a high speed and that it had 4 bright landing lights. He also said it had passed about 1,000 feet over him. He narrated the craft's movements for about 5 minutes, positing that whomever was piloting the craft seemed to be messing with him. He said the vessel was a shiny metallic color and it had a green light on it. Suddenly, in mid-account, Valentine began experiencing some engine trouble. When Melbourne flight officials asked him one final time to describe the mysterious aircraft above him, he responded with some of the most haunting final words ever recorded. Quote, "It isn't an aircraft," unquote. The transmission suddenly cut off after this, and the last thing the flight service heard was a metallic scraping sound. Authorities assumed the plane had simply crashed due to engine malfunction, but a sea and land search yielded no sign of Valentine or his missing aircraft. The missing person case was quickly closed, with Valentine being assumed dead, but 5 years later an engine cowl flap matching the missing plane washed ashore on Flinders Island in Australia. Things got even more complicated when Valentine's father revealed that his son had been a, quote, ardent believer in UFOs and even actively worried about encountering one while flying. In 2014, a UFO group in Victoria claimed that an unidentified farmer saw a 90-foot craft hovering above his farm on the morning that Valentine disappeared. This anonymous individual even asserted that Valentine's missing plane was stuck to the side of this UFO. Unfortunately, the mysterious man has never been revealed, and no further revelations regarding the pilot's strange and perhaps supernatural disappearance has been explained ever since. "20-year-old Branson Perry disappeared from his father's Skidmore, Missouri home on April 11, 2001. A friend, Gina Crawford, was at the home at the time of the disappearance, assisting to clean the place before Perry's father returned from a hospital stay. Crawford claimed that Perry walked outside and shouted to her through the window that he was returning some jumper cables to the shed by the house. 2 men were working on Perry's father's car within eyeshot of the home at the time Perry walked out. Despite these numerous witnesses, moments later, Perry vanished into thin air. He was never seen again or since. This missing persons case has gone back and forth over the years, from leads that quickly dead-ended to some frightening and bizarre developments. Branson Perry's disappearance remains one of the most frustrating and puzzling in recent history. The circumstances in the short time prior to the disappearance make the case even more strange. Perry was working several odd jobs, including for a traveling petting zoo, at the time he disappeared, and he suffered from a medical condition called tachycardia that resulted in a rapid heart rate, though reportedly it didn't slow his activity down. On April 7th, a few days before his disappearance, Perry visited his neighbor, Jason Bierman. Bierman, according to accounts, gave Perry a dose of an unidentified drug. According to true crime author Diane Fanning, Perry then stripped naked and danced around Bierman's home before shaving off his pubic hair and engaging in, quote, sexual activity with the older neighbor. Upon sobering up, Perry felt embarrassed and told his father everything. Perry's father, Bob, became enraged with Bierman, but oddly never confronted the man for the perceived assault on his son. Bierman was never named as an official suspect in the disappearance due to what appeared to be a lack of motive. On the day he vanished, Gina Crawford, the friend who had visited the home, assumed that Perry had simply wandered off to visit someone and went home herself without a second thought. The following day, Perry's grandmother dropped by to find an empty home. She assumed that Perry had stepped out to run an errand, but found the house still empty the next day when she visited again. She and Perry's parents filed a missing persons report on April 16, 2001. The police found that all of Perry's belongings had been left behind in the home, and foul play was suspected. Leads came and went, and most dead-ended. But in 2003, the investigation took a bizarre turn when a Presbyterian minister and Boy Scout leader named Jack Wayne Rogers was arrested for some gruesome yet unrelated charges. After attempting to perform an unlicensed sex reassignment operation on a transgender woman and failing to stop the bleeding, Rogers was charged with first-degree assault and practicing medicine without a license. It was only upon further investigation of his possessions that truly revealed what a monster Rogers was. They found evidence of extensive child pornography on Rogers' computer and distressing online posts under graphic handles like, quote, "bugger butt," "oh hail Satan," and "extreme body mods" that described the rape, torture, and murder of multiple men. Rogers even described cannibalizing the severed genitals of some of his purported victims. One of these accounts matched the description of Branson Perry, who was described as a, quote, "blonde hitchhiker" in the post who was assaulted and murdered, with his remains buried in the Ozarks. While searching the Rogers property, a turtle claw necklace resembling one owned by Perry was found in one of Rogers' vehicles. But Jack Wayne Rogers denied any involvement in the disappearance and maintained that the graphic online posts were simply fictional writing exercises. Due to a lack of direct evidence, Rogers was cleared as a suspect in Perry's missing person case, but was sentenced to 17 years for assault on the surgery victim and 30 more years on child pornography charges. After the sentencing, Perry's own mother, Rebecca Clino, stated that she felt Rogers was not involved with her son's disappearance after all. One further odd connection that makes the Perry case stand out even more is his connection to another Skidmore murder victim. He was the cousin of Bobby Jo Stinnett, a pregnant woman famously murdered by another woman who cut the baby from Bobby Jo's body and left her to die in 2004. Authorities seem to believe that Perry was also murdered, but his remains are yet to be discovered. Whether he ran afoul of local drug dealers or fell victim to a twisted, cannibalistic scout leader, the reasons behind Branson Perry's disappearance remain unclear. And until a body is located, the Perry case remains open, and he is considered a missing person to this day. Shortly before the entire family vanished in 2009, Bobby Dale Jameson visited his pastor, claiming that their home was haunted. He was seeking spiritual counsel and even asked about special bullets that could kill spirits. Days later, Jameson, his wife Cheryl Lynn, and their 6-year-old daughter Madison all disappeared from their home in Eufaula, Oklahoma. It was October 9th, 2009, and the small family would never be seen alive again. The family was initially reported missing, and several leads were generated which caused authorities to drive up to a piece of property that Bobby Dale Jameson was purportedly interested in purchasing for his family to live on. It wasn't far from there that the family's truck was found abandoned by the side of the road, only an hour away from their home in Eufaula. But this discovery only added to the mystery, since their cell phones and wallets and other personal belongings were found left inside the truck, along with the family's dog, Maisie, who was found dehydrated and emaciated, but still alive. $32,000 in cash was also found in the vehicle under the driver's side seat. The Jamesons were both living off of disability benefits at the time of their disappearance, so it was unclear where the large amount of money had come from and what its purpose was in the vehicle. Investigators initially thought that perhaps the family was killed in a drug deal gone wrong, but it was unclear why they would have brought their young daughter and dog along with them for the exchange. Everything left in the car suggested the fact that whatever had caused the Jamesons to leave their vehicle, they did not expect to be gone for long. Search parties fanned out from the truck miles into the forest but located nothing, and the case quickly went cold. Until November 16th, 2013. 3 miles from where the truck had been found, despite an extensive search performed years earlier that had turned up no leads, hunters discovered the skeletal remains of 2 adults and 1 child. And while forensic experts were confident that these remains were that of the missing family, no cause of death could be determined from the remains due to the advanced state of decomposition. Police then renewed their investigation into the case. Police recalled how days before the disappearance, Bobby Dale Jameson had told his pastor that, quote, 2 to 4 ghosts were living on his roof and haunting the family's home. They also discovered some disturbing security camera footage of the house on the night of the family's disappearance. The video footage showed both Bobby Dale and Cheryl Lynn packing up their belongings and dumping them into the back of their pickup truck. At points, the pair would simply pause and stand, staring blankly as if they were in a dissociated or trance-like state near the vehicle, before proceeding with the packing. The family was also known to have a handgun that belonged to Cheryl Lynn, and it was known to have been kept in the vehicle. The night of the disappearance, the video also showed Cheryl Lynn packing a brown briefcase into the vehicle. The local sheriff believes that the briefcase could be an important clue to the disappearance, and indeed, neither the briefcase or the handgun were ever recovered. Meanwhile, Cheryl Lynn's mother added on to this by claiming that her daughter and son-in-law had become involved in a cult and ended up on this cult's, quote, hit list. She also cited some bizarre behavior from her daughter leading up to the disappearance, where they were on a simple car trip, when Cheryl Lynn suddenly told her to get out of the car and forced her to exit the vehicle at an intersection prior to their destination. Police also reportedly discovered that recently Bobby Dale had purchased a satanic Bible as a joke, but had begun reading it at night. Others, however, suspected a much less sensational and supernatural cause of the couple's disappearance. It was theorized by some involved in the case that Bobby Dale's own father murdered the family. Shortly before the disappearance, Bobby Dale Jameson was embroiled in a bitter lawsuit with his father, Bob Dean Jameson, claiming that he had threatened the family and even gone so far as to hit Bobby Dale with a vehicle in November of 2008. Bobby also claimed that his father was involved in methamphetamines and criminal activity, and even had a protective order against Bob Dean where he claimed that he was a, quote, very dangerous man who thinks he is above the law. Police seemed to disagree with this and have never considered Bob Dean a suspect in his son or the family's disappearance. Perhaps the most convincing theory of all is that Jameson himself killed the family, but then before killing himself. This theory was initially sparked by the discovery of an angry 11-page letter that Cheryl Lynn had written to her husband shortly before their disappearance. Likely, the true motive will never be uncovered without a direct confession or any other clues coming to the surface. Ultimately, the Jameson family's unsolved disappearance and ultimate tragic fate remains a disturbing open case to this day.